I thought, oh, this is fun. The startup mode's fun. When it gets to cruising altitude, it's pretty boring, and I would kind of turn my sights somewhere else. So I could also say I was a certified shiny object chaser along the way.
We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast and channel. I want to welcome you here today, and today we are going to be speaking with Paul Moore of Wellings Capital. Paul, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Casey. What an honor to be here, man.
Man, we're just excited you're here and excited we can all maybe learn something and hopefully get to the bottom of what we need to do to get to where you are in life at this point. So,
man, I don't know if anybody wants to get where I am, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, after all, I had a podcast called How to Lose Money for years.
Oh, man. So I think the how to lose money part of it probably was the play on turning it around, possibly.
We talked to successful entrepreneurs, investors, business owners, managers, and we talked about their path of pain that everybody goes through on the way to success.
Yep, I'll tell you, and you know, you and I were talking before the show, and I think that path to pain, or that path of pain rather, is fairly common, and I think there's a lot of very there's a common thread that's kind of sewn between all of us and how we get to where we are, and to be quite honest, the majority of it seems to be, I don't want to say education based or something. Maybe it's just like something like, man, if I had just known this or just known that. So that's why after speaking with you before the show, I'm just really excited for us to dive in here and learn those real life experiences that led you down the path to become a capital raiser, and as we learned a few minutes ago, the fund of funds model that you've got, and you're in a spot where a lot of people want to be. So let's just to kind of dive right in and start from the beginning, and maybe what sets your sights on saying, hey, I want to be a capital raiser at some point, or hey, I want to be in the real estate business, or maybe the combination of both. So I'll let you take it over and tell us a little bit about how you got where you are.
Yeah, so I had an engineering degree, which was my first mistake, and then I got an MBA at Ohio State and went to Ford Motor Company for 5 years. I really enjoyed Ford, but it wasn't, like a big company. I mean, I found myself constantly trying to find entrepreneurial opportunities on the side. And so after about 5 years, I left Ford with another guy, and we started a company. He'd already started a couple of years ahead of me, actually. I joined him, and we started doing a staffing thing. We built that, sold it in 5 years to a publicly traded company, and I moved to the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia to raise my family and enjoy some passive income. Well, I thought, I'm an investor now. I wasn't an investor at all. I was a speculator, a full-time speculator. I didn't know the difference between investing and speculating. And so I started doing stupid things with the money. And, if you take Warren Buffett and Benjamin Graham's principles, you can boil it down to this. Investing is when your principal is generally safe and you've got a chance to make a return. And speculating is when your principal is not at all safe and you've got a chance to make a return. And so I really have to define myself as a speculator. The problem for me was I tried to have the same fun and excitement from my investments that I got as being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is fun. I started well over 24 businesses over the years. I literally don't remember them all. I've got a desk drawer full of cards from different companies. I even did some multi-level stuff years ago. And I did all this stuff and I thought, oh, this is fun. The startup mode's fun. When it gets to cruising altitude, it's pretty boring. And I would kind of turn my sights somewhere else. So I could also say I was a certified shiny object chaser along the way. But I'll tell you, it was a rough road, especially for my family, because I was always in startup mode. I was always working those long hours, and then often just moved on to something else. And so that was definitely an issue with me over the years. I'm talking 25 years ago, 20 years ago. Well, in '99, I invested in real estate for the first time, and then more in 2000, I started flipping houses. I did about 60 house flips with a good friend of mine. We then started building houses, and I learned something really important, Casey, and this is a real good takeaway for your audience. You shouldn't build an expensive waterfront house if you don't know how to put a doorknob on your own house. I'm just saying. And I've got a locksmith upstairs right now proving my point. Our lock
Yeah.
broke, and someone said, well, just take it apart. And I said, yeah, right. I've got a checkbook for that. And at any rate, seriously, it's not, I tried to be a builder for about 8 homes. And I found out through the course of this, I had this inkling that, hey, I'm a good starter and promoter, but I'm not really a good manager. And I had to face that, but I didn't face it yet. And so after the downturn in 2008, by that time I had done waterfront lots at Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia. I had done multiple websites. I oversaw one still running right now. I had done a subdivision, done all kinds of things. I flipped about 30 or 40 lots at this waterfront resort. But anyway, in 2010, I invested in oil and gas in North Dakota. And everybody that drilled a well in North Dakota was making money, except us. So we actually decided we would be part of a wildcat well. It was too boring to make just 40% return on your investment annually or whatever they were making. We wanted to go big. So
Yeah.
we were part of a wildcat well that if it's successful, it would have made the guy who ran it one of the wealthiest guys in America. And he was a legit guy, wonderful guy, but it didn't work. We put all this money to the bottom of a hole in the ground, 5 holes in the ground, and hit oil every single time, came up with nothing. But what we learned during that process was there was a massive housing shortage in the oil fields called the Bakken of North Dakota. And so we invested in housing there. We did our first multifamily deal. And I had always been curious how to get involved in commercial real estate. I didn't know where the on-ramps were, where the entry points were, who to trust, how to invest. Well, we just found ourselves doing it. We built up a ground-up multifamily quasi-hotel. Then we did another one. Then we did a Hyatt hotel. And we ended up selling all of that. But along the way, I thought, yeah, I love multifamily. And so I went through a multifamily mentoring course to officially learn how to do it. And ended up writing a book on multifamily called The Perfect Investment.
Yeah.
And we did our first multifamily deal, which was in Kentucky, in fact. And it didn't go well. And it really punctuated to me the fact that I am not a good operator.
Yep.
I know how to find good operators. I know how to pick out great property managers, but I'm not the one to do it myself. And so it all became crystal clear for me a number of years ago. And that's when I decided, hey, we want our company to be a company that goes out. We want to be a due diligence partner for our investors.
Yep.
And someone who vets the very, very best operators. And then we converted quickly after about a year from doing single syndications as a third party. We converted over to being a fund because we want to give our investors diversification across different asset types, different geographies, different operators, different strategies, and of course, different properties.
Sure.
And so that brings us up to today. Now, what I skipped was how I learned to raise capital. And we can circle back to that, but I'm going to take a breath and see if you have any questions.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I think of course, there's there's a lot of questions there. Now I want to go back and there's a single term that goes along with what you were talking about when you're basically speculating, I think another term for that might be called like gambling almost. I mean,
Yeah.
you basically look at it something that's like, hey, either a 49, 51% chance this out or the other, and like you said, I think a lot of people think that that's investing. Like
Mm,
that's the furthest thing from the truth. That's basically
right.
saying, hey, I'm going to try to cut the timeline of making this much money down to one minute second, rather than saying, hey, I think this is a good plan. I think this guy's a good operator. I think this is a good
Yeah.
way to do it. And when you go that route,
Yeah.
it just tend to get frustrated because they
Yeah.
think that, well, so and so made it, and so
Yeah.
and then
That's
all of a
right.
sudden they're going, well, anyway, I
Yeah.
just think that we want to kind of preface that for the investor side of our audience. Now, as we move forward and
Can I
move
make a
through,
comment on that real quick?
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
So George Soros, did you hear? Is he like campaigning to be Antichrist or something? I'm not sure. But anyway, George Soros is a great investor. That was a joke. George Soros is an amazing investor. He's like 90 something years old. He said if investing is fun, if you're having a good time, you're probably not really investing. You're probably speculating. Paul Samuelson was the first Nobel Peace Prize winner from the US in economics, and he said investing should be boring. It should be like watching paint dry or watching grass grow. If you want excitement, take $800 and go to Las Vegas.
There you go. I mean, and so many of us are like, and I'm a lot the same way. So I don't want to act at all like, hey, I'm so much better because I can do this or this. What I'm saying is there's so many of us that are just like you, and I say us, okay, because I'm the same way. I see this shiny object, and I'm like, and somehow or another in my mind, I'm like, oh man, if I could just make this app and this app connect and do this, then that's going to be wonderful. Well, then I do it,
Mm-hmm.
and this next part of this process is fixed, and then all of a sudden, I realize in a week that none of that really mattered, and I just needed to get in and put in the work, and so some of that chasing the shiny object syndrome is real.
Casey, I talk about that all the time on BiggerPockets. In fact, I'm regularly ringing this bell about don't speculate, don't speculate. Things are looking an awful lot like 2006, 7, 8 right now.
Sure.
And though they won't end just like that because history doesn't really repeat, it just rhymes, according to Mark Twain. The truth is, it probably is. It's rhyming a lot right now. Listen, one of the top multifamily syndicators in America emailed me this morning. He's a friend of mine, and he said, I have a dog property. It's a multifamily property with about a 2% interest rate on it, interest only, and I'm barely covering the mortgage. It's just one of
Ah,
those things, okay? He said, someone just came along and offered 50% more than I paid, and they're going to take on what is probably about a 5% mortgage. Let me ask you something, Casey. How is that going to work? How's
it's
that going to
probably
end for those investors?
it's
How is it
probably
even going to make it through a year?
well, what's happening, I think, unfortunately, for a lot of unsuspecting investors, is there's this relative idea that cap rates are always going to be positive, or there is the thought that people are going to be buying for,
Yeah,
let's just say, let's go to say they're buying at a break even cap rate. Okay, our mortgage
yeah,
is this, our insurance
right,
is this, our expenses are this, and we're not going to make any money. But guess what? In 10 years, this property is going to be worth boom.
exactly.
And so
It might,
there, yeah,
but might
exactly.
isn't a good business strategy.
And what do you call that? What did we just call that?
Gambling.
Gambling. I mean, that's it. You're basically saying, hey, that's cool, man. Take my money, tie it up, and I'm going to hope that I don't. Now, the chances of losing your whole principal in a real estate deal, yeah, there has to be a lot of other outside things that happen in order for that to take place. But the fact of the matter is I can sit at home with my $50,000 or $100,000 in my bank account and not worry about it, rather than some guy having it that I'm like, well, hey, this isn't looking too good, is it? And then all of a sudden it's that's coming, and there's a lot of unsuspecting people out there that are going to be blindsided when this happens.
Right. It's absolutely true. Think about it. If cap rates go up 1 point and you bought at 4% and it goes up to 5, you think, well, I lost 20% of the value. Do the math on it. You have to actually raise rents 33%, assuming costs go up at the same rate. Okay. You have to raise rents, let's say at least 25%, just to get back to break even.
That's right.
Well, if you've got an 80% mortgage, and I know most people don't have 80, but let's say 75, you're dangerously close to losing your deal if cap rates go up 1 point. But let's face it, they could go up 2 points. Then people will lose their deals when they have to refinance and there's no money there.
Yep. And the thing is that some people are okay with that. And I feel like there's a small percentage of real estate investors out there who are it's just almost a game, and they're like, okay, so hey, here's $100,000 of my $1 billion nest egg, whatever. And so I feel like it's just not an okay investment strategy for me or my folks. It's just not. Right. It's just not the way it works for us.
Good.
But when you start talking about somebody that's like, hey man, I'm going to take if there's a 60% chance I'm going to double my money, 40% chance I lose half of it. What's $100,000? That's a different crowd. That's a different type of audience.
Yeah, well, it's fine to speculate as long as you're doing it with your spare change, or if you just want to live that way, that's your choice. But I didn't want to live that way after I had tried it. I mean,
it's a long road. It's a long road. I mean, especially if it's money that you're counting on to facilitate the life that you say it's retirement or whatever, something that you're wanting to slow down and you're wanting to have a steady stream of income. That's definitely just not the way to do it. So now that we've got the gambling out of the way and the speculation out of the way, again, everything you said, basically, I'm like, oh, I relate to that. Wait a minute. That sounds like me. Wait a minute. What? Mm-hmm. And then, so from an operator standpoint, I think there's a lot of us out there, again, notice I said us, who just don't feel like, it's one thing when somebody pays rent and the rent becomes part of your investor's return. It's another thing when a single mother can't pay her rent and you have to tell her that she is no longer welcome to live there. Mm-hmm. And I don't just mean like single mother, single father, single whoever, a family or whatever, or a person. And that's just not what I'm good at. I'm not good at the shrewd part of this business. And I realized, like you had said, I'm not much of an operator.
Same here.
And I think that's a lot the same way that the passive investors are like, hey, I'm not an operator. I don't want to have to kick people out. I don't want to have to go change light bulbs. I don't want to have to clean carpet. I don't want to have to do this, or this. So let's invest here. Now, I think obviously the first question that pops in everybody's mind when you start talking about that is, well, so you have these operators that you work for or that you work with. You vetted the operators, you found it. Now, what's the benefit and why should I come to you, right, Paul, instead of going directly to the
there's so many answers on that. Yeah. So for one thing, if you are, I'm going to back up one step before I answer that, and that is this. If you have a full-time job and you're making a lot of money, you're probably working more than 40 hours a week, but maybe not. You've probably got a life. You've probably got a family. You should have some time off. You probably don't, even much as it's tempting because you saw it on HGTV, you probably are not going to really enjoy dealing with toilets, tenants, and trash on your weekends, lunch hours, evenings, vacations. I was talking to an an oral surgeon, and he said, yeah, I'm building up a 20-home portfolio, and I'm actually only on home 3, and it's driving me crazy. I have to make calls to painters between oral surgeries, and I just can't do this. There's no way I'll ever get 17 more houses.
It's a
And
service business.
he just realized, yeah, he had to hire, he wanted to invest passively. So why should they come to a fund of funds instead of just directly to the operator? Number one, we are able to pick the very, very best. If you've got this, again, full-time job, or even if you're enjoying retirement, you probably don't have the skills, the knowledge, the time to fly around the country and really vet operators the way they need to be. But if you're going to give $100,000 to somebody, you ought to get to know them. You ought to have dinner with them. You ought to see how they treat their staff. You ought to get reviews. You ought to check their deep criminal background. You ought to check everything. Well, chances are, and most investors we talk to don't do very much of that at all. They just like somebody because they heard them on a podcast or they saw a nice website. Well, we do all that deep dive. And the 80-20 rule, Perry Marshall has a book called 80-20 Sales and Marketing. It's brilliant. And we all know what the 80-20 rule is. But the 80-20 rule, Perry told me that it's fractal. We're friends. And he said it's fractal. He said that the top 20% of the top 20 get the top 80% of the top 80 results. So the top 4%, in other words, are getting 64% of the in the top 64% of the results at least.
Sure. Yep.
So we're looking for those, and you're looking for those truly great operators. And those truly great operators often are not good promoters. I was on a webinar recently with a great operator who was a terrible promoter. They didn't know how to use Zoom, and when they did do the webinar, there was a guy on the webinar, literally one of the presenters, eating an apple while the other guy was talking. And I thought it was amusing, and it just reminded me, these guys aren't great promoters, but they're amazing operators, and that's the kind of things we're looking for. So that's number one. We can vet better deals, and if the deals you and I can find are going to produce more safety and a higher return at the same time, that's going to more than offset the small fee we charge. So that's number one. Number two, we actually are a larger investor, and as a larger investor, we can often get better terms. So one of the investments we make is with an operator who has a 60-40 split and a 7% preferred return. But we get an 80-20 split, and I think it's instead of a 7, we get a 9% preferred return in most of our investments with them. Well, as a result, we're passing that along to our investors, and that's sort of more or less just offsetting our fees. In other words, our fees will be washed out in that in that transaction because we're getting a better return from that perspective.
Yeah, the fees plus there's the passive investor is still making more.
Yes.
And you're still making, whatever the fees are, and
right.
Okay.
And I will just say it's washed out more or less. In other words, if it was the exact same investment, it might be more or less the same return because our fees do, there's a cost to that. The third reason is we have diversification. Somebody can invest $50,000 with us, and that money be spread across well over 100 different assets, 5 or 10 different operators, 22 different states, and different asset types. We're in self-storage, mobile home parks, multifamily, light industrial, RV parks, and we might even do an occasional specialized retail deal. And so you can't get that. If you wanted to invest $1,000 across 50 deals, well, there's no way to get in because no one's going to take $1,000. But we'll take 50 and we'll spread it across that. And that diversification is the third reason I would say people should consider us.
Now, I want to jump back a question that I know is burning right now because is the why. So tell us a couple of different things. The operator. Let's look at the operator. What allows him to give you better terms, first of all?
Yeah.
And number two, what is why is the operator even coming to you and saying, "Hey, Paul, we'll give you this if you can bring us this." I mean, I guess I'm talking about like size of investment, possibly
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, so we're only writing one check. So,
Yeah.
for example, we invested, I think it was $25 million in one portfolio, and the guy's portfolio only had 58 million in it total. Okay?
So you were
So we were like 40 something percent of that. That was one check to them, one investment portal entry. It
yeah.
was one phone call to deal with for them. And so
Right.
that's one reason that they wouldn't mind giving us a better split. And then we're managing all those individual investors. That's really the biggest reason.
So you're saying that the fact that you can bring a bigger chunk of pie
Yeah,
to the
that's right.
table, that the operator's saying, well, hey, Paul, yeah, well, if you can do that, that's going to save us all of this. We'll let you handle the investment relations part of
Right.
this, and then we can go do what we love to do, which is be operators.
Yes, that's right.
And I guess that's just it looks to me like there's again and I don't want to act like I'm just now learning some of this because this is the same thing we do. But
Yeah.
so what I'm getting at is you're laying a road here where it's like there's several whys, but all of them kind of lead back to the same path, which is best for everybody. You know, you're like, okay, we can vet these operators. We
Right.
can know that, hey, this guy's been in business for boom, 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 and this guy has made this, and this. And so we're vetting our operators based on that.
Right.
Then you're saying, hey, then we can diversify. We can say, hey, if there's a hurricane in Florida, we've also got property in Ohio, or we've
Right.
also got property in Kansas, or
Right.
if there's a Dust Bowl in Kansas, we've also got property in Virginia's.
Hmm.
Or the Virginias rather. And
Right.
so when you start talking about just the fact that the diversification seems to me like that's a massive
It's
value
huge.
point for people to invest.
Oh yeah, I mean literally, if I was a passive investor and I had a choice of investing with your fund of funds or my fund of funds versus one deal, I would absolutely I mean, knowing what I know from the inside, I would absolutely pick the diversified route.
Yeah, well, again, go back to the what we very first covered in this episode was are you an investor or are you a speculator?
Yeah.
Because the, while they both could certainly lean on some of the same objectives, the main thing is that you're either gambling your money as a speculator or you're saying, hey, I want to generate a specified return for a specified length of time, and this is what I'm going to do. So, really, the diversification just makes the most sense for that type of investor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, look, if somebody says, diversifying is only for amateurs, and my answer is exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're dealing with. No offense to any of my investors, but only a few out of 515 investors, only a few are experts.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
rest,
Well,
and even if they're an expert, that doesn't mean they're an expert in RV parks in Oklahoma.
and I want to get your take on this, and this is a subject that I bring up fairly regular, just because it's absolutely enthralling to me. But there's a guy that I've watched for several years, and this is his strategy. And when I say his name, I think everybody's probably going to know who he is. I
Okay.
don't know that, but he lives in Omaha, Nebraska, and his his first at the very top of his list, he says the management, like, you vet managers, period, end of story. And as long as the manager is doing their job, basically it makes our job as being as investors. Then do you see what I'm saying? I mean, am I following that right to say, hey, if the guy in Omaha, Nebraska, which I think we all know who I'm talking about, is Warren Buffett, at
Mhm.
Berkshire Hathaway diversifies their funds across, numerous other brands. Now they're not
Right.
doing they're obviously real estate elements to that, but what I'm getting at is he takes investor monies as shares of Berkshire Hathaway, takes that money, and then goes out and buys insurance companies and
Yeah.
Coke companies and those kinds of things. So it's the
Yeah.
same. This is how billionaires do business too. I mean, and that's it's so. This is where the cream rises to the top, and you and I are focused on the cream, not
Yeah.
gambling my money on somebody that might be rising to the top.
It's absolutely true. So Warren Buffett says he focuses on the horse more than the jockey, and that really bothered me because I really think he focuses on the jockey. So I drilled into that a little bit. He says I only want to invest in products that have they're a durable product with a durable competitive advantage and a moat. So I'm
Correct.
focused on the product. But that's not totally true. He focuses on the manager more so. So in 1979, when he got a phone call from a guy he knew well. He knew him very well, and he thought, this guy is perhaps the best CEO in America. And that guy said, hey, his company was called Crystal Cities. He said, I want to buy ABC. Would you help? Buffett, in a 15-minute phone call to his friend, said, yes, I'm in. Well, he didn't have to go out and vet all the details of ABC and all the
Yeah.
underlying stuff. He didn't have to become an expert in TV broadcasting. He knew his friend at Crystal Cities was. So he jumped in. I think he put in $600 million or something like that, 79, right? And so it wasn't that much at the time, but I mean, in today's dollars. But anyway, he made a massive profit 17 years later in
Yeah.
'96 when Crystal Cities sold ABC, and I believe it was to Disney. He made a massive profit. He didn't have to know how to run a TV station. He found a manager who did. He
That's
also
right.
doesn't pick the Dairy Queen flavors, but he makes a profit from every Dairy Queen
Hey, and
ice
step
cream
back,
cone.
and the manager that knew how to run the TV station, he also didn't have, he had to answer to one investor versus
Right,
the whole crowd of them behind him. And you see what I'm
right.
saying? I mean,
Yes, I
it's
do.
it's 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 so anyway. All right,
Yeah,
I get to talking about it. I'm just like, this is what makes the most sense for everybody. I mean, it's
right.
just you're either a speculator or you're a speculator slash gambler, or you are an investor, somebody that wants to make a steady return. Okay,
Right.
now, so let's move forward and let's talk about Wellings Capital, and let's talk about where your position is right now, and what kind of maybe the short term and long term future hold for that, and what you're looking at.
Yeah, so we are really continually looking for recession-resistant assets first, and then we'll find an operator that's doing a great job. And we won't invest unless we find both. RV parks looked really good to us a number of years ago. We've been investing in mobile home parks for years, and that was going incredible. But RV parks just went on steroids with COVID, and a huge percentage increase in RV sales and RV park popularity and all that has led to a real desire to be in this space. But we weren't willing to do it because we weren't an operator, and we couldn't find anybody except a few institutional players like Sam Zell and Sun Communities who knew how to do RV parks really well. Well, we finally found one, and we've done some vetting on them. My wife and I went down to Fort Worth, and we actually stayed in one of their RV parks, and we got to enjoy that. And then my business partner flew down a week later to their headquarters and actually got to meet their staff, their team, interview them, talk to various investors, talk to a variety of people who are involved in their company, and we're in the process of deciding whether or not to invest with them, and I think we probably will. But
Sure.
that's what Wellings Capital does.
Well, that's so yeah, there again. I mean, you basically just laid it all out. We find an operator, we vet an operator, and instead of investor that's saying, "Hey, I want to put this money in," having to call and basically say, "Oh, this guy looks, I like him. I'm going to put my money with him." Well, I like a lot of people too, myself, and you're like, okay, what if he runs off with it? What if he whatever?
Yeah,
So I guess I
right.
see, and then you go down there and vet them and look at their actual product. We were in the multifamily space. one of the things that we always look for is quality of life kind of stuff. So it's essentially the same scenario. When we look at quality of life, what is the quality that these operators are putting out there
Right.
for their residents? Are they do they care about what is going on at their apartments and so on and so forth? So,
Right. That's
but
good.
so you all are going to move towards the RV park investments, you think?
We'll be adding
And
that to everything else we're doing, right?
sure, sure. And what other spaces do you think you all are going to look for with your? I think it's your next fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll have a new fund opening up within by the time this podcast launches, probably. So, yeah, we plan to stay in self-storage mobile home parks as our main bread and butter, and then also apartments. Very specialized on apartments. We just don't buy any deal. We're looking for operators who have an opportunity to sniff out intrinsic value that you
Yeah,
couldn't find elsewhere.
yeah.
And so that's what we're looking for in that arena.
That's that's so that needs to be on the top of everybody's mind,
Yeah.
intrinsic value, because I hate to tell the unsuspecting investor out there that when an operator, when their main objective is to just say we're going to buy this and our return is going to be based on an increase of rents.
Hmm.
Eh, Wonderful short term, I guess. It depends on the area. Again, I've seen it firsthand as you have as well.
Right.
You have to find those intrinsic value
Yeah, it's
deals,
very true.
and I think a strategy could be based, say, maybe 30% on rent increase, right? But not the whole strategy doesn't need to be, oh, we're just going to go up on the rents. You
Yeah.
know,
So, yeah, for example, we just invested in three apartment assets, and the rent increases, looked really promising. But what was more important to us is this operator has a really amazing way of getting tax abatements from local cities. Basically, he can get 180 to 100% of their taxes abated for 99 years.
wow.
And so he buys these, and the day he buys them, he also signs that agreement with the city to get their taxes rolled back. It's a massive intrinsic value that no other operator we know of has learned to unlock,
Well,
and
there
that's
you
what
go.
we're
The
looking for.
geography. I mean, they
Yeah.
know their area.
Right,
It's the geographical diversification. It needs to be at the top of everybody's mind,
right.
because you can't otherwise make that work. So anyway, all right. Now, again, before the show we talked, and we're kind of running out of time here. So I really want you to. You had said I think you all were looking for somebody to be a capital raiser.
Yeah, we would love to
Team.
continue to build our team. So if anybody wants to get hold of me at wellingscapital.com, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure, and I can tell y'all what Paul knows what he's talking about. He's been in this game a long time. He, definitely reach out to him at Wellings Capital. So is that the way you want people to reach out to you? I mean, that's kind of the next move in the show, is to say, hey, how can the audience reach out to you? But Paul, if
Yeah.
somebody wants to possibly invest with you in Wellings Capital, or if there is somebody out there that's like, hey, I think
Yeah.
I could raise capital with them. What's the best way for somebody to reach out to you specifically, or your team, where they can get in touch with who they need to
Yeah,
get
the
in?
best way would be just to go to wellingscapital.com, and a little form will pop up and say if you want to learn more, you can connect with us here. Wellingscapital.com/resources has a lot of information they can learn, so they can learn more about investing in real estate in general, and specifically self-storage, mobile home parks. They can get access to my books and some other ebooks we've done.
Awesome, man. That's great. And I'll tell you, I love the whole RV park. That's a layer that's kind of added to some of these people that we've been seeing in this, that you and I both been seeing in this business, is
Right.
kind of moving through. But I'm like you; they were a little shy on the operators. I mean, there's not a lot of really good, solid RV park operators out there, because there's so many. It can be full of holes if you're not careful. So,
Right.
That's wonderful. That's so glad. I'm so glad to hear that's the space you're kind of moving towards, at least with your next fund. So anyway, well, hey, Paul, I want to thank you again for being with us today. And I know that you had probably 1,000 other places to be, and I know the audience is thankful for you spending a little time with us. But I can't thank you enough, and we really appreciate everything you've left us with today.
Absolutely, man. It's great to be here, Casey, and man, I'm really honored and wish you the very best.
Well, certainly, thank you, and you all as well. And I hope that this is not the last episode we can do together, because I feel like the audience can benefit from everything you bring to the table. So,
That'd be
okay,
great.
reach out to Paul if you want to talk with him more about investing with Wellings Capital, or again, if you're possibly looking to maybe be part of his team. I know that he'd be glad to hear from you. So, Paul, thanks again, sir. Everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening to the Cash Flow Pro podcast and being hearing us on our channel. And we hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.
Cash Flow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.